And we are going to start off the podcast today talking about the big AEW media deal that just happened a couple of days ago, last week actually. There's a lot of great news for AEW, possibly even some great news for fans in here. Lots to unpack, and I just felt really uncomfortable doing it all by myself. No, it's not that I felt uncomfortable. I actually thought it was a great opportunity to have Jesse Collings back on the podcast. Sometimes you just need an excuse. Jesse's a busy guy, he has his own shoot job. He does the Gentleman's Wrestling podcast. He does some of the most sought after writings over there at voicesofwrestling.com. So, you need a good excuse for him to make some time for you. So this is where I decided to pull it off. How you doing, Jesse?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be back on the MrWarrenHayes show. I appreciate the invite back on to the show after I haven't run afoul of you yet, which is good.
No, of course not. No, au contraire. Au contraire. We're always glad to have you. You're a smart guy and a fun guest, and I couldn't think of anyone better other than, let's say, David Zaslav to have on to talk about the AEW deal. And then again, it probably wouldn't be as it'd probably be a little tainted as far as his analysis would go. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, actually, they mentioned David Zaslav's actually here. Let me just go in. Hey, David, you can come in now.
Of course, he hangs out.
Wouldn't that be something? He just shows up.
And he's got a spritzer in his hands. Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, yeah. Pull out another headset. Just plug him in.
That would be a shocker. But listen, I'm thrilled you're here. I
book him, but it's not for my own show. It's for a guest appearance on your show.
Yeah, for surprise appearances, right? It doesn't but that's the humility you have, right? That's how humble you are. You keep that kind of stuff for other people. You don't do that for yourself.
I don't like attention. Like, I don't know. I don't like people saying I did an amazing job. I know that by saying that sounds conceited, but I find that like praise like that to be awkward. I don't know if a lot of people I feel like are like that though.
Yeah, I don't have much of an issue dishing out, praise or saying, "Hey, great job."
Oh, I'm like full of.
But receiving it all, like, I think I understand you. It makes me feel a little awkward too. You're like, "Oh, gee, thanks," but thank you. It's like, thank you for.
Yeah, like
I send it back immediately, kind of thing.
I play a lot of pickup basketball, and like I love if someone makes a shot, like good shot, or like someone does like good things. Like I'm clear compliment guy, but if like I make a shot, or like maybe I make a couple shots, I get hot, I make a couple shots, help my team win, and everyone's like, "Oh, great job, Jesse." Like I don't like that. I'm like, "Oh, that's okay. You guys don't have to mention that."
All right.
It's probably some like deep psychological reason why I'm like that.
But I wonder if Tony Khan is privy to
Tony Khan is not like that.
I don't think so. I think
that man likes credit and he likes praise.
Exactly. I think he's okay with this, and he probably got probably quite a bit of praise for this deal here, Jesse. Let's go just with the overarching details, just to make sure everyone here is in context, and I'll get your thoughts out the gate. After which, 3-year deal AEW has signed with Warner Bros. Discovery, fourth year option that WBD has. Many numbers have been circulating as far as what we're speculating as to how much per year they got, because WBD and AEW did not reveal the financial details, but we believe, at least I listened a bit to Brandon earlier today. We're recording this on a Sunday, so I listened to WrestleNomics earlier today. Read Dave's analysis in the Observer. Let's say $550 million for the duration, broken down to, and this is how Dave Meltzer has broken it down: $180 million in 2025, $185 million in 2026, and $190 million in 2027. The option to extend the deal in 2028 is at a higher, but of course unspecified value. This is significantly above a lot of expectations that people had. Jesse, what were your initial thoughts when the news dropped?
Well, I think it's interesting because I think the let's say like I would say like the first 6 months of this year was spent, I think, with a lot of anxiety people had about what is the AEW TV deal, what's going to happen, are they going to get a big increase. It
Mhm.
seemed like, for those people who were in the know and had studied it, that it seemed likely they would get a pretty sizable increase based on the ratings that they were doing, based on kind of what the going rate for that kind of product was going to be. Um, but there was always this constant kind of anxiety about what it was going to be, if they were going to get a big increase, that kind of thing. And then I don't know about you, Warren. I don't know. Maybe this is like maybe July or August. It started to become pretty obvious that they had signed some sort of deal with Warner Bros. Discovery, or they were about to sign a deal.
There was
It
something. There
just
was
seemed
absolutely
like,
something.
yeah, there was enough rumblings from the reporters that are in the know about that stuff. You could just tell from Tony's attitude kind of shifted from,
Hmm.
we're in the negotiation period to more like, I can guarantee we're gonna be, on, TBS and TNT for a while. So I think before the deal really was formally announced on Wednesday, we had already been kind of living in a world where we knew not the exact details of the deal, but most of the deal. Like the figure didn't surprise me at all. It seemed about pretty much right in line with what I think the most in-depth experts thought about in terms of what the money figure would be.
Hmm.
I think it surprised some people that were not maybe listening to the correct experts. But like I think from what like Dave Meltzer had speculated on, what Brandon Thurston had speculated on, this seemed to be right about where I think I expected it to be. Were you surprised by anything in terms of like monetary value?
Well, I'll tell you what surprised me the most, and we can get into those details maybe moving forward. I was surprised that AEW is still hanging on to its pay-per-view rights. I think that's the most surprising element to me. I thought they were just going to do a buy that Warner Brothers was just going to do a buyout, just buy the license, and then plop that on the service, and that'll be that. No, it still goes beyond
Similar
that.
to Peacock, WWE on Peacock.
Exactly. So that I got to tell you surprised me a little more. Let's add let's add those details just very quickly. Then let me see here. Yeah, starting in 2025, the pay-per-view events will be available on Max at a discounted price for those who are subscribed. So this is similar to the ESPN model that UFC has. Until initially though, events will continue to be available on traditional pay-per-view platforms and as well as on the usual digital distributors, ppv.com, YouTube, Triller, etc. And there's also a change in the advertising and revenue sharing. Unlike previous deals, AEW will no longer share in advertising revenue with Warner Bros. Discovery, making a shift in how they've structured their financial relationship since the company's inception. So that's also very, very interesting as well.
Well, it's kind of a full circle moment. If you remember, the original deal was, you know, basically, you know, AEW would get um, the ad revenue from it,
Right.
essentially, and they were getting very little upfront revenue
Mm-hmm.
from Warner Brothers. And then with they kind of ripped up that TV deal right before the pandemic, and they got a more traditional deal in the sense that they were splitting the ad revenue,
True.
and now Warner Bros. Discovery has fully taken over the ad revenue, and that kind of speaks to the long term viability of the product in the fact that um, Warner Bros. Discovery feels comfortable enough with selling the advertising product that that's something that they want in the deal. Is like, yeah, we want all that ad revenue for all those commercials. What kind of commercials do you see during Dynamite? Um,
Well, I don't know because
do you watch?
I get it in Canada, so you're gonna have to tell me.
Yeah, so you get the world feed. I've kind of thought about doing a study on like who is advertising for AEW, if that's something that we could see. Like, are these um, like big money? Like, are these Fortune 500 companies? Are these
Mm-hmm.
major advertising brands you would see advertising during like the NFL? Um, because we've talked about that. Like, if you watch I know if you watch WWE, like a lot of the advertisements are for like um unhealthy food items, is what I would say. Like it's
Sure.
like Wingstop and Doritos and
And
Pizza Hut, and it's
saucy
like,
nugs from Wendy's. I heard about the saucy nugs from Wendy's.
and so I wondered if AW's is substantially different than that. I don't know. I feel like they're pretty much the same. We've seen some kind of personal advertisements and stuff like that. But um,
Maybe
I
we
would be
can.
interested in. Sorry, I think with the pay per views, to get back to pay per views,
Sure.
um, we don't know what the discounted rate is going to be or how big of a discounted rate that is going to be. I think one important thing to note is that, um, you know, Warner Bros. Discovery was used to get a portion of the pay per view revenue that AEW have because it ran BR Live, Bleacher Report Live,
Mm-hmm.
um, so which was owned by WBD. So, um, when you bought your pay per view through there, which is how I bought most of the AEW pay per views, I bought them through BR Live. Uh,
Did you get to watch them?
WBD.
Were you able to watch them?
Yeah, I never. I think there was one. I forget which one. I think there was one in particular where it was kind of like touch and go if it was going to work, and then it worked
Okay.
like right before the show started. But
Okay.
other than that, I never had the kind of issues other people were having. But I mean, I believe that they were.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but Warner Bros. Discovery recently announced that they're sunsetting that. I believe it's done. You can no longer purchase a pay per view through BR Live. It's like a dead system because I'm pretty sure the only thing they ended up selling on it was AEW pay per views. So this is kind of an extension of that in the sense of they're going from getting a piece of pay per view revenue from BR Live to now tying it into people with Max subscriptions.
Sure.
Um, you have Max in Canada.
We do not.
You have something similar though,
We
right?
have a Canadian knockoff called Crave. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Yes.
right. I remember now that I was when I was in Canada, staying at an Airbnb in like April.
You
There
can.
was I remember now that I remember saying it. It's like I'm like, what is this? Some knockoff like
Well,
HBO Max?
it's pretty much it. It's basically HBO licensing, Warner Bros. Licensing off all of the Crave stuff to a Canadian company because these are our cultural. This is our cultural like watchdog who establishes these rules, so that the nasty Americans can't come in too much with their overarching culture. Trying to get a cultural win in Civilization 5. It's more we try to do our own things. Yeah, we'll watch your shows, but we're gonna make money in the meantime doing it. Yeah,
Oh,
that's essentially it.
A Civ 5 reference.
Hell yeah.
We're
Hell yeah.
sending our, we want open borders. We want to send our musicians over there for a world tour to influence your culture.
There you go.
You're going to be wearing our blue jeans sooner than later.
Hey, we know what you're
I
up
did
to.
notice when I was in Canada that like one of the things I thought was like super interesting just from like a cost perspective was that like the same food items that you go to the supermarket, the same food items in Canada, um, have like different designs
Sure.
than they do in America. Like the box of Kraft macaroni and cheese has like a different logo
Well,
in
it's a different
Canada
name
than it does in the
entirely.
US.
It's a different name entirely. Like here,
Specifically Kraft. I just use that as an example, but I remember going to the supermarket and just seeing like the cereal boxes, like, hey, you guys have Lucky Charms, but like the logo is different, and like, and it's like, why is the company designing two of these or more for every country? Like, why can't they just have the same design?
it'd be fun to look at the differences and sort of point out what's the cultural impetus of changing the Lucky Charms leprechaun from the United States design to the Canadian design.
I
But
was at
look,
a
I don't understand.
sorry. I was no, no, no. I was gonna go super off topic talking about M&Ms and Smarties,
No, go
but
ahead. Talk about M&Ms and Smarties, please do.
I was at I was at
Because I was going to talk about craft
in
dinner some
April
more.
in April I was at I was at a Dairy Queen in Niagara Falls,
Sure.
Canada,
Yep.
and I was ordering, and he asked, what do you want in your Blizzard? And I said, oh, you guys got M&Ms, and the guy goes, but we don't have M&Ms. We have Smarties. They're extremely similar, and I knew that's what Smarties were. They're British candy,
Mm-hmm.
and I asked him. I was like, Man, how many times per day do you have to say that? And
Pretty
it's like
much.
so many times because it's like super touristy. It's all these Americans coming over the border. They want their M&Ms and their Blizzard. They don't want their damn Smarties, which are of course a completely different candy, extremely different type of candy in America. Uh,
Oh,
we
there's
have our
something
own
called
candy called
Smarties in the
Smarties.
U.S. that are not Smarties, like we know in the
Yeah, they're
Commonwealth.
like these like almost like Pez like fruit flavored like discs.
Oh,
Um,
rocket candies. That's what I think. That's what we call them
uh,
here. They're
yeah,
like
let me
they're like
actually
in a
look this
little
up.
they're like in a little see-through kind of. They're like in a not a tube, but like in a roll, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, they're exact. Yeah, they're literally exactly that. Yes, you're 100% correct.
Okay. Yeah, we call them rockets.
What is going on here? So you guys have Smarties, but they're called Rocket Candies,
And we
and
have
we have
and we have M&Ms, but they're called
something called
Smarties. But we also
Smarties.
have M&Ms
Well,
too.
M&Ms and Smarties, they're slightly different.
Yes,
There
and
are like,
I think there's significant differences between the two. The Smartie,
yeah, I do too.
the Smartie is flatter. It's closer to a UFO shape. The Smartie than the
Yeah,
M&M, which is a little more bulbous. You know, I think it
yeah.
condenses the chocolate thing in there, and the candy shells are different as well. The Smartie is much thinner. You know, personally, like I'm an M&M guy over a Smarties guy. If you'd ask me for both, if I go to the Dairy Queen and the guy says, "Well, I don't have M&Ms," I don't have M&Ms. I have Smarties. Well, I'll be like, "Well, that's a compromise I'm making, sir, right
Yeah,
now."
I dumped those Smarties right into my Blizzard. By the way, I was not picky about that. But these Smarties and Rocket Candies, those are the exact same candies. Like I'm looking at them, they literally it's even the same logo and design. They literally just replace Smarties with Rocket Candies.
Yeah. Oh, there
It's
you go.
very odd. Smarties are also an awful candy, but anyway, let's go back to this WBD TV deal. Uh,
Because we were talking about in Canada, for some, I don't remember where we were
I
at.
asked what advertisements you get in
Oh yeah.
Canada,
Well, like I don't
and
know
you
how
said
much it depends on, because it's TSN2 in Canada, right? So it's not the on which AEW is broadcast. So it's not even like the main channel. It's not like TSN proper. It's the secondary channel. And I kind of feel like the ad spaces that are there aren't necessarily determined by what events are on because TSN proper has all the has I think they have the Raptors, or is it Sports Center or Sportsnet that look. The point is that the main channel has the big live sports events, and I think that's what they program mostly for. And
this is like it being on ESPN2 in America.
yeah, see, like during Dynamite, I get twice during a 2 hour sitting of Dynamite. I get at least twice an advertisement for an emergency outdoor power generator for your home, where and garden, like a filter to keep leaves out of your gutters. I get
Yeah,
those.
so you're getting like paid programming style advertisements.
Yeah, exactly. Like a little longer than 30 seconds, but not quite a minute. You know what I mean? Exactly. And you sort of look, like, well, like technically, I would be the target, the target audience for that. I don't know if the average wrestling fan is for outdoor emergency power generators. I don't know, but that's the kind, like there's no premium advertisers, there's no beer ads, there's nothing to that effect.
Yeah, you wouldn't see like an ad for Toyota or like
There are
Visa
car
or something
ads.
like that.
There are car ads, but again, I don't know how specifically tied into it, because it just feels like
Yeah.
it feels like you'll get ads for Kia with these 25-year-olds, getting ready to go out for a night on the town, and then they're going to jump into their Sportage and paint the town red, kind of thing. And I don't know how close to reality that is or not, but like there's a bit of it's a hodgepodge where you go from, things for your home, and then, buy a car so you can take your friends out club hopping just as long as you don't drink, kind of thing. I don't know.
So the two things that stand out about the deal right away. The first is that it is only for 3 years, which by like sports media right terms is not particularly long.
Right.
Usually we see these deals around 4, more like 5 years. Sometimes they can be as long. I know the Netflix and WWE deal is technically for as long as 20 years, but could be much shorter than that. But usually we see these between like 5 and 8 years. It seems like.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is only being 3. And I'd be really interested to know, and this will perhaps come out in the near future, of which side was really pushing for 3 years. Was it the AEW side, or was it the Warner Brothers Discovery side?
I was gonna ask,
because that I think makes
yeah,
that makes a substantial difference. And is it, Warner Bros. Discovery being like, we're ready to commit for 3 years, but maybe we're kind of worried about the ratings trend. Maybe we're not super convinced that this is something we want to sign forever and ever. Maybe they don't want to sign a lot of things for a large amount of years, given the kind of turnover that has happened for that company post merger. Or on the flip side is AEW being like, we're happy to be here for 3 more years, but we think we can, if they're like an athlete that wants to hit free agency sooner, because they think they can cash in on a bigger deal in 3 years from now. So that to me is a really interesting component of this deal, is that it's not quite as long as most deals and probably shorter than what we expected, despite being still a hugely substantial deal in terms of funding.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to ask you if you felt like if that was a plus or a negative, if you thought if this was provisos put in by either party. And I think most people had a tendency to think, oh, well, it's Warner Bros. Who are, they just want to make sure that they're not getting themselves into something too long term. But the other side, the on the flip side, it is entirely possible, that, like you said, AEW sees itself as a great free agent, and in 3 years they want to get more cash. Do you one of the hallmarks of the first run of the first deal that AEW had was the renegotiations, right? They renegotiated what, twice during the old regime, if I'm not mistaken. Do you have a feeling if this might be a thing for during this period here, especially considering how short it is?
I would say no. I think this is more of a stable deal in terms of. Look, if we think about this as a TV show, right? A TV show, debuts. It gets a pilot episode and it debuts, and the network and the creators of the TV show and the production company sign a deal to produce 10 episodes or something like that. Usually, it's rare for a TV show to be guaranteed anything more than that.
Sure.
However, if it's successful, you'll see a new deal come up, and it might be for an additional season, it might be for 2 seasons. And then if it's still successful, you'll start seeing like multiple year deals get signed. Like, we know that, to use like The Simpsons as an example, because they've had so many seasons, The Simpsons has like a 3-year deal where they're going to produce, a 37th season, a 38th season, and a 39th season. Because it's been established for so long. So I think this is like, if we look at the original TV deal, which was essentially just an ad split, and the second TV deal, and then even, the addition of Rampage, the addition of Collision, all of that is just kind of, we're at this exploratory phase of the relationship between this new thing that we started airing on our network, in AEW with television partners, negotiating a deal. And I think now this is the stable, locked in, this is what we're going to be producing. I wouldn't expect too many more surprises, but I think it's possible we could see more content. I mean, I wouldn't rule out like a additional reality shows or studio shows or just something else in additional of AEW content that we could see on Warner Bros. Discovery. I could see them start using the video library more for product. I don't know, you could do like a AEW greatest matches and have like an hour of that airing on some random time. Maybe it airs like, you know, at midnight on TBS or something like that, or right after Dynamite or something like that. I think there's probably more flexibility in that. But in terms of major stuff, I wouldn't expect a major change. Um, the other big thing is that it's kind of two-part. The first is that there's no mention of Rampage in this TV deal at all. We have there's been really no indication about what's happening to Rampage. The fact that it is not part of this TV deal makes me think that might be the end of AEW Rampage.
Dave outright said in the Observer that it was discontinued.
Yeah. So I guess it's not like super duper duper surprising, but it is somewhat surprising. But the big thing about that, and this is what I think the major news was Wednesday, is that there still seems to be one more thing to come, and that is, what is this AEW Shockwave show? Is that going to be on another platform? And if it is, where is it going to be? And if it is on Fox, like what has been rumored it might be on, that is a complete game changer about everything. And that is, to me, because I feel like, Dynamite and Collision staying on TBS and TNT, they're getting more money for it. That's huge news in the terms of like the history of the promotion. But as far as where like I was, and I'm sure you were, and a lot of listeners were, it seemed like that's kind of what I expected, right? I expected, eventually, I expected them to kind of stay with Warner Bros. Discovery. It seems like that relationship has worked out really well for both sides. Tony obviously thinks very highly of them. But if they have another show that's on network television, that is like hugely unexpected. Would be a real game changer in terms of being able to reach so many different people. I'm hesitant to kind of say anything about it at the moment because we don't know much more. I know there was, I read in the Observer, and I think it's SEC Scoops reported this, but it hasn't really been confirmed anywhere else that.
Yeah, BJ Bethel talked about it.
Okay. Yeah, and BJ Bethel's pretty reliable. He seems plugged in on some of this stuff. Yep. That Warner Bros. Discovery has a exclusivity clause with AEW programming for cable and streaming, which makes sense with TBS and TNT cable stations, HBO Max streaming. So if there was going to be another show, it would almost have to be on network television, which opens up really only a few possibilities. It could be on Ion TV, which is a very small network television station. Do you guys have, even you guys probably don't have Ion in Canada, do you?
No.
Ion is
because of my American pals.
Yeah, it's similar to, I would say it probably even replaced UPN in a lot of
sure, okay. That now I know
locations.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know the exact history of that, but Ion I know has been experimenting with more sports live programming. Like Ion for me was like they just showed Criminal Minds like all day every day.
Sure.
It was like one of those that just showed a lot of like reruns of network television shows, and I know that they have a deal with the WNBA. And they have been doing really strong ratings for Ion with some of the WNBA games that they've had on there. So they've kind of pivoted to live sports. So could they be a player for this AEW Shockwave show? If that's the case, that's not really that big of a game changer because Ion is a smaller station than a TBS or TNT. But if it's on Fox, like it's been kind of rumored to be, that is a paradigm shift for the entire industry, really.
Outside of Ion, what are the options, right? NBC, that's a no-go for sure. ABC has
CW, which might have been a player, but is probably not with NXT and that relationship with WWE.
ABC's connections to ESPN, ergo the UFC, I don't think that's necessarily possible either. So that leaves
CBS Yeah, and I mean, if they got on CBS, that would be insane.
I mean,
Um,
you'd get a whole, you'd get the blue bloods demographic. You'd get the,
yeah.
that'd be tremendous.
I mean, CBS is America's most watched network. They would do big numbers on CBS just by existing on CBS. Um,
Is
but
it
if they got a
America's
show on
most
Fox,
watched
I mean,
network? CBS,
it
really?
is it is the number one most watched network in America. Our
That's
biggest network is CBS. And the 18 to
wow.
49 demo might shift around or not, but like in terms of like in America, I don't know how this pertains to Canada and other countries, but in America historically, there's the big three
Sure.
networks. There's NBC, CBS, and ABC.
Mhm.
And then Fox was really this upstart network that debuted, I think, in the late 1980s as a Murdoch like brand, which really and they basically created its own network off of the strength of the NFL and having the NFL programming that kind of forced its way into becoming a player and breaking up this triumvirate that had really controlled all of television before the invention of cable. And then there's like CW and Ion and a few others that are like smaller,
Yeah.
PBS, that are like smaller networks. But like there's the big four, and CBS is the most watched in America.
Now you just mentioned it.
No,
What if Shockwave ended up on PBS, and then Shockwave would begin by saying, today, and they'd say, this episode of Shockwave is made possible by viewers like you. That'd be tremendous, right?
it would be. I would, look, I'm a PBS. What do they even call it?
A
I'm a
PBS head.
WGBH
Oh,
sponsor.
all right, okay.
So I do contribute to my local PBS station here in Boston, WGBH.
When I was a kid,
Um,
the PBS station was out of Burlington, Vermont. That was the one that, and
okay,
I watched the
you want to
hell
watch
out of
some
that.
Zoom? Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
Um, yeah. Well, for kids who didn't have cable, that was I watched a decent amount of PBS as a kid. I watched the Arthur cartoon. I believe Barney was on PBS, maybe.
Barney was on
Um,
PBS. My
yeah,
kids
so right in my
themselves
wheelhouse.
watched some of that too. Yeah, no, it's
Yeah. Anyway,
I feel it with
that would be
cartoons.
yeah. I don't think people are talking about. I don't know if PBS is even considered broadcast
It's
network, but it is. It's like it's Channel 2 here. Um, but I mean that to me is like almost like the news about that. If we do see Shockwave, and that adds a lot of questions like how much money are they going to get for Shockwave? Could they get? I think Dave was speculating like, um, if even if it's a 1 hour show on Fox, are we talking about an additional like $80 million to this
well,
deal?
I
Like,
mean, that's the wild thing when you think about it, right? Because I have two thoughts on this. The wild thing is that, uh, you know, AEW managed to renegotiate its deals by adding more content, right? By saying, I wasn't Rampage out of the first renegotiation where they outright said, yeah, we'll do an extra hour of programming. Give us more money, we'll do an extra hour of programming for you. And the same thing was with Collision, right? And now they're taking away an hour of programming from Warner Bros. And they're getting this massive raise nonetheless, based on I guess the catalog, the current performance of the two shows, Collision, Dynamite. So that in that sense kind of blows my mind, where Warner Bros is like, sure, take an hour away and here's more money nonetheless. That's kind of fascinating. The second thing that came to mind when I was thinking about the Rampage situation is that, or at least the Shockwave Rampage situation. If Shockwave goes to broadcast, it's got to become the A show, right?
it changes everything
It like
like that. Like, and I have so many questions. Would you be, um, you know, let's say Shockwave is on Fox. Let's just say that. Are we talking 1 hours? Are we talking 2 hours?
sure.
Are we gonna be taping that live? Like, are we gonna be taping it? I've heard that like Tuesday night or Thursday night would be the most logical
Well, I mean,
night for it. Most
everyone
likely Tuesday night.
everyone's broken it down, right? Mondays, no, like you
No.
don't know. Wednesdays, well, we already have Dynamite. Let's say that things stay the same. So Mondays are no go. Wednesdays and Saturdays, you already have that program. Sundays, well, Tony doesn't want to go head to head with football, right? And an occasional AEW pay per view on top of that. What's left? Yeah.
Yeah, Friday you're talking like if we're gonna keep the Rampage slot, you can't really keep that
No.
because you have um Fox. If it's gonna be on Fox, Fox has pivoted to doing these college football games on Friday night that do extremely well in the ratings. Shockwave is not gonna match that.
No.
Um, but I agree, it has to become the A show.
Right. It
You're gonna
has
because
to.
what I think, I mean, and it's just a game changer for AEW in the sense that AEW's weakness when compared to WWE in a lot of ways comes down to like name recognition.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows WWE is. People might recognize the biggest stars of WWE. They'd certainly recognize like The Rock in these people that they show in the promos, even if they're not actually going to be on the show all that much. And that gives WWE a huge like just institutional advantage over AEW. But putting AEW on network television, like there was the idea that like WWE being on Fox would just by itself lead to a new boom period because all of these people that weren't either didn't have access or didn't like really know about WWE would be able to watch,
Mm-hmm.
would get into it, and they would not only would they be tuning in on Fox, but they'd be tuning in on Raw. They'd be going to live events. They'd be buying merchandise. They'd be subscribing to the WWE network. That caused the stock price to go up for WWE back when that Fox deal
Mm-hmm.
was first announced, because the speculation that just by merely being on Fox, WWE was going to get this huge surge in interest that ultimately did not happen. This huge surge in interest came much later than that, for more typical wrestling reasons. Programs got hot and the fans got invested in certain wrestlers. Um, but I think that would almost definitely be the case for AEW because I think while most people who are watching football on Sundays know what WWE is and have probably made a conscious decision about whether they want to watch it or not, they probably those same people probably don't know what AEW is.
Yeah, I
And you would
agree.
be reaching a new audience. You'd be making the product more accessible for people who maybe don't have cable, who haven't had a way to watch, Dynamite or Collision Live because they're not cable subscribers. Um, there is so much more. There's just a huge new audience to reach.
Yeah.
Um, it just seems unlikely that AEW, SmackDown couldn't survive, WWE couldn't survive on Fox. But AEW will. It probably has to do with AEW coming in at a substantially lower price tag than
That's what I'm
WWE.
thinking, right? Like,
Um,
and if
well,
the
and I do wonder if Tony is the NFL owner. Um, like as I mentioned earlier, the Fox network was created basically by the NFL. It was a fledgling network. Rupert Murdoch got NFL games on Fox, and
I
it
mean,
allowed the network to survive. And so there's contacts there that Tony has, um, with these television partners through his other sports franchises that maybe open up these kind of opportunities for AEW.
I,
And it would be an absolute coup for AEW to get that spot.
if TV executives are probably a lot more comfortable sitting down to have a meeting with an NFL team owner, or at least in the upper echelons of, as opposed to Carney wrestling promoter, who you know
Well,
who
to be fair, it's probably Nick Khan, in area,
sure, but
you know,
even if we go in the past,
Ari
right?
Emanuel.
Because
Yeah.
you know I think one of the reasons why this is also very mind-boggling is that this promotion is 5 years old. Like it's there are promotions actively out there right now in the U.S. who have been around longer, who have TV, but have been struggling to get better. Um,
Hmm.
to
Well,
get better
there was a
deals.
great quote. Yeah, there was a great quote from I think it was Kathleen Finch, who is
Mm-hmm.
an executive with Warner Bros. Discovery, who said like, "We're amazed with the work that AEW has been able to accomplish. This is in just 5 years. This is really something that would you would expect from a brand that has been around 15, 20 plus years." which I thought was a huge compliment to what and put into context from, you know, from a legitimate major television executive that shows, what AEW has been able to accomplish in terms of, um, we can talk about declining ratings, we can talk about declining attendance. Those are real issues for the company, but when you get a television executive that's kind of just coming out and saying, like, it's amazing how loyal of a fan base and a consistent following for 52 weeks a year that this company has, and that's why we're willing to make this long-term commitment and can, commit this amount of money to them, is because of that. It's a remarkable achievement, because it really is.
And it helps put
one
it
thing
on
I want
context. It helps put it on in context for the wrestling bubble, for the rest of us nerds who are so, we get tunnel vision at some point, and we don't realize that the business that AEW is putting in and ultimately generating for a television show, okay, it might not be operating on your whatever standards you have for a pro wrestling promotion, whatever, but the business that they're producing right now, as opposed to so many other things on television right now, is phenomenal. And for 5 years in, forget about it.
And I also think in this TV deal, they'll be simulcasting Dynamite and Collision on HBO Max. So you no longer need cable to watch Dynamite or Collision. You can, in the US at least, you can subscribe to HBO Max. That is also kind of a game changer, because Max is in, I think, like 70 million US homes or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Or something like that. They have that many subscribers. And so that's again a part of the population that maybe hasn't been able to watch your product on a weekly basis. So you're kind of double dipping. You're double dipping. You're getting the cable. You're catering to the cable audience still, but you're also able to reach, on average, younger audience that are cord cutters that don't have cable but have subscriptions to a streaming service. And this is, for WWE, it's huge for them to be on Netflix, which of course is the king of streaming services, because that is in a lot of ways reaching a new audience, or an audience that is not subscribing to cable. But it is, I think, significant that you are now presenting your product on a weekly basis to people who don't subscribe to cable. And that can be, that can manifest itself in a number of ways. That can be, you might have some casual fans that maybe they were watching YouTube clips, maybe they were following just online. Now all of a sudden they can watch it on a weekly basis, and they become, more valuable customers. They start going to live events when they're in their town. They buy merchandise. They purchase pay-per-views. Those are all ways to get extra revenue from people that previously were kind of on the outskirts of following your promotion because they didn't have cable.
And you mentioned it, in regards to, this is interesting. I think it's a neat little segue into another opportunity that's opening up here with WWE going to Netflix. You said it yourself, like they become global. That's the idea, is that everything is going to be distributed throughout the world. And a lot of people have made this point, and I'd like to know what you think about it at the same time, where this creates possibilities for AEW to distribute themselves on an international basis, where WWE is going to be abandoning some deals, right? Like we can assume in the UK, right? Probably Canada as well. AEW did probably and other places that, I'm not, India, maybe we finally cracked the code, who knows? But we've opened up these opportunities. These opportunities open up for AEW now that WWE basically said, not only do you handle our content distribution, Netflix, but you handle our distribution at large, right? WWE is completely hands off, which is also a complete flip of how they've handled their business for so many years. Now they're not even involved. Netflix is going to get them into all those homes. But AEW may be here on top of everything, on top of the, 185 million a year, on top of the whatever they'll get for pay-per-view revenue, whatever they'll get for Shockwave. They might even be getting more out of these possibilities for international distribution. Do you feel that we're clutching at straws at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely always been a room for growth with AEW. Was can they do a better job maximizing international TV rights deals? Can they get paid for these other countries? Because when we talk about the TV deal, we're almost exclusively always talking about the U.S. TV
Yes.
rights because those are by far the most lucrative TV rights. But over the years, WWE has been able to sign some pretty large TV deals, most importantly in India with their deal with Sony 6, which I believe is their second biggest TV deal. I forget, I think it's in the ballpark of something between $30 and $50 million a year. Don't quote me on that, but it is a pretty big TV deal. It is not a small, insignificant figure. And they have all these other distribution deals that have been, in all these other countries. But now that everything is going to be on Netflix, or every country that has Netflix, that is going to be substantially different. And AEW, in addition to maybe exploring more of these international deals, they can come in and say, oh, WWE, used to have an hour block of WWE or 2 hour block of WWE programming. Why not have AEW programming? You want wrestling? Here's wrestling. So they could this could be an opportunity for them to, not only organically expand their reach on a global basis, because that is an enormous advantage WWE has. We can talk about the gap in TV ratings in the U.S. all we want, but a huge advantage WWE has ahead of AEW is WWE has incredible international brand recognition, has fans all over the world, and we've seen that WWE has been able to cash in on that in recent years by having these site feed paid events in international countries and drawing these huge, lucrative gates in the UK, in France, in Germany. Obviously, the Saudi Arabia deal is a consequence of that as well. So that's a huge advantage WWE has had, and
Sure.
can AEW, they don't even necessarily need to cut into WWE's market, but just to also expand into that and reach a global audience is a potential huge advantage.
They've got they've got some elbow grease to put in. There's some work to do, but the opportunities are there.
It's a real opportunity.
And I was just checking real fast. Like, I can't find. I was just doing a little bit of research. I didn't find an exact figure, but in 2020, WWE was saying that the Sony 6 deal was their third biggest partner for TV deals behind the UK deal. So, I mean, that's still enormously significant.
Yeah, I actually thought it had. I'm trying to remember an old Observer, like just on the back of my head. I thought it had actually passed UK as its second biggest market, but
all I could find.
These are lucrative. Yeah, these are like lucrative opportunities that AEW should be trying to explore. I wanted to kind of hammer home this point here in the sense of
hammer away.
What is this? What does the TV deal mean to me as a fan of AEW and as a fan of pro wrestling in general?
I agree. It's a good moment to do a little full circle here, because the business talk is fun and it's interesting to think about all of that, but concretely.
Yeah. What is the TV deal from a business perspective means that, Tony Khan is going to make more money off of this thing. That's ultimately what it means. It means that Tony Khan is going to, probably make, a substantial profit off of AEW over the next few years, which is great for billionaire Tony Khan. But the more substantial thing for me as a fan of AEW and just a fan of pro wrestling in general is that the TV deal signifies that AEW is going to stick around as a major entity of professional wrestling and have an extremely strong presence in, general entertainment by being on, cable networks with large audiences, not as large as they used to be, but still large audiences, enormous reach, and perhaps even extending that, if the Shockwave deal ends up being something on network TV. And that's ultimately what I think is the important thing to recognize is not just, AEW is going to make more money. Great. I don't really care if AEW makes a cent or not. The only thing I care about is, can AEW continue to be a place where, wrestlers can get paid, matches can be put together that I want to see, that it is not a company that is, poisoned by Vince McMahon's vision of pro wrestling. That's all it can ever be. It is, everything that AEW has brought to wrestling that's a positive can continue to remain uh, as a function over the next several years. That's what this TV deal ultimately means. It means AEW is here to stay on stable grounds, in that everything good that AEW has brought to the professional wrestling industry over the last few years is going to remain intact.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to be clutch. I was never like this, but we don't have to be, clutching and wondering, oh no, what if it gets canceled? What if it ends up like WCW and ends up going away and we're just left with WWE as our only real option? We don't have to be worried about that for now.
There was so much.
The TV deal shows.
There was so much anxiety. It was like I was at a stage that this is what I was looking. This is what I was looking forward to the most in regards to the deal announcement. It's just for everyone to be able to get a good rest at night, a good sleep, and not wake up the next morning wondering, is this going to continue? Because that was something
Those people are still.
I know.
Those people are still like that.
At some point, at some point you have to be able to move on, though.
I agree. But I do think that those people are still like that, and then that's not going to, like, I think people are like, oh, will this be the end of people questioning if AEW is about to go out of business? Will this be the end of like the grifters and the trolls who are always saying that this isn't going to happen? No, I knew that wasn't going to happen, because it's not an ideology that's based on fact or reason. It's based on vibes, catering to a certain base and things like that. Mm-hmm. But it does, what this deal shows is that AEW is here as a major presence in professional wrestling. And it's going to remain that way because it is locked into a pretty large media establishment. Mm-hmm. Especially moving, the moving stuff onto Max and getting really into the streaming game, which is something they haven't really explored at all, is hugely important. If they can get on Fox, that's great too, obviously. But this is really, just securing AEW's not just its existence, but its existence as a strong entity of entertainment that will be going forward. And we can have, criticisms of some of the booking, and some of the matches might not be that good, and they might be pushing some wrestlers that I don't really like at the expense of wrestlers that I do. But all of that is kind of secondary to at least the existence of the company as a major force in the industry.
And it kind of sounds corny at this point, but it is important to have competition in this environment. WWE was left unchecked and was able to buy up the competition. This is stuff that you can't do on high levels, where the government gets involved and tries to prevent monopolies and so on and so forth, right? All sorts of regulatory, what's the word I'm looking for? Organizations, just keeping everything in check. No one ever decided. No, that's the thing with pro wrestling. Pro wrestling has been able to get away with so many things because it's pro wrestling. Like, no one thought, well, who cares if there's only. No one thought, who cares if there's only. No one thought, there shouldn't be just one national wrestling promotion. No one, in the high ranking establishment of the US government back in the early 2000s, no one was even concerned about that. It was, sure, who cares? But it nonetheless destroyed a bit of an ecosystem that had existed. Of course, got rid of competition, and then WWE did whatever it needed to do, unchecked over the next near 20 years, all by themselves, developing what they had to do. So when I say it's corny, it's corny, but it's true. Wrestling is in a better place now that there's competition, and solid competition. One that is, like you said, entrenched in entertainment establishments. That's not just doing things off of IWTV, God bless them, but no, something that will really and that offers conditions for pro wrestlers to come and make a proper living out of what they do as well as entertainers, as combat sport practitioners, whichever way you want to flip it. They're not just going to go around and trying to make the dates every weekend and getting their paydays like that. So it's good for WWE too. Now I know there's a bunch of factors.
People take
it.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just like, look, if you're a WWE fan, the product 100% got way better once AEW debuted. And people take for granted
factors, but
right. There's a bunch of factors
did contribute. I'm convinced of that.
There's a bunch. Yeah, right. There's a bunch of factors that go into that. Obviously, with Vince stepping down and Paul Levesque taking charge. But even before Vince fully stepped down, there was some change in the positive feedback for WWE from its fans. And would that have happened without AEW putting some pressure on WWE? I don't think it would have. I think there's definitely something to be said about AEW providing competition and providing pressure onto WWE to improve the product, and pressure that wasn't there before. So even if you absolutely despise AEW, and you love WWE, there's still a role that AEW has played in benefiting WWE, just like the way WCW played a role for bettering WWF, in the 90s. Even if you absolutely hated WCW, WCW put a tremendous amount of pressure on WWF, which forced WWF to make some changes that ended up becoming very popularly received by its fan base.
Yeah.
So there's that too.
No, absolutely. It's a crucial thing, and I'm excited at the prospect that we might that this is going forward. That's mostly it. I'm kind of like on your side. Like I don't cheer companies on. You know what I mean? Like I'm not a guy about companies. I'm more about people. If anything, I'm more excited for talent. Who will be. But I mean, again, this has been going on for a couple of years now. But that will be able to negotiate better. Circumstances, but circumstances is not the right. Why am I slipping on all the words all of a sudden? Why am I just, better conditions? That's the word I was looking for. Jeez, better conditions for themselves.
Look, pro wrestling should not be in a situation where one person, whether that person is Vince McMahon or Paul Levesque or whoever is in charge of WWE, pro wrestling should not be in a position where one person gets to control and dictate who gets to be a successful pro wrestler and who does not. And for a long time, that was the case. And we show what that can do to an individual if you watch the Vince McMahon documentary, or at least if you're familiar with the story, that when that person has that amount of control and authority over people's careers, a bunch of crazy stuff happens. And there's a reason all those old wrestlers now who still can't admit that Vince was a bad person, because they view Vince as the person who made them millionaires, and Vince gave them an opportunity. It's because Vince controlled the entire industry. And that's not healthy. I think you look at what some of the comments Swerve has made over the last few months about the way he was seen in WWE and the way he's been allowed to be seen in AEW. There's a major difference between those two things, and that only comes about because AEW offers a viable alternative for people like Swerve, people who feel like they're not getting a fair shake in WWE to express their fullest talents, at least get put in another spot where that becomes a possibility. So there's a lot of people that, it just came, AEW didn't come at the right time for them. There's a time where Zack Ryder could have jumped to AEW at one point.
Sure.
His career might look a lot differently if that happened.
He's actually wondering right now why he hasn't been called back anywhere. He's actually questioning himself right now. What a topical topic, Jesse.
But if we go to 2010, 2011 Zack Ryder, when he was getting a lot of organic momentum amongst the fan base, and WWE clearly wasn't interested in pushing him as a top guy. Maybe he goes to jumps to an AEW in 2011, and his career looks very differently than it ultimately ended up being.
No, that's
pretty much any of those guys. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
what is Bryan Danielson's career like if AEW existed for the entire time? What's Nigel McGuinness's career like? I mean, that was one of the things I touched on with some of my writing recently, with Nigel kind of returning to the ring, which was like we lost 13 years of Nigel McGuinness's career because there wasn't a place for him to work that would give him that would he thought would make it work. WWE didn't want him. WWE didn't want him to be a wrestler. TNA, was a joke by the time he was there and finished up there.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't able to make it, enough money in Ring of Honor that he thought it would be worthwhile to continue to be a professional wrestler. I have a feeling his attitude would not have existed if an AEW had been around, a place where he could make a full-time living being a professional wrestler. And we lost, 13 years of who I think is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. We just lost that like entire stretch of his prime because there wasn't a company like AEW around.
So hopefully the this deal. This deal is pretty much set. Hopefully it keeps on for a long time. We'll be having these discussions in 3-4 years again, Jesse. So we'll be doing all of this all over again. It'll be something, but look, I can be hopeful, looking forward, and say hopefully next time people won't be questioning if they get a deal. Hopefully it'll be more along the lines of who is going to get the deal, who is going to get AEW, as opposed to, whether or not AEW is going to be thrown into the bin or, tossed into oblivion, which seems more and more unlikely. But look, it's pro wrestling. You never know. Jesse, I want to thank you so much, tremendously, for joining me today to share some thoughts and break this down a little more. Do you want to plug your stuff before we head on out?
Yeah, just a Gentleman's Wrestling podcast. That is my podcast. I don't know when by the time this airs, we'll still be a few days away from this running. But if people want to check out my next episode, I have Stu Williams and Lyric Swinton on. We're going to be giving out like some 5-year awards for AEW.
Oh, fun!
Kind of talking about the highs and the lows of AEW over the course of 5 years. I'm pretty excited to talk about some of those subjects. We'll talk about like the best match. We'll also talk about like who was the worst signing and what was the worst promo ever in the history of AEW and that kind of thing, which I think would be a fun piece to reflect on. She is I think there's an obvious candidate for worst signing, and I will get to that. On that podcast, I think it'll be a fun discussion point.
Yeah, don't spoil anything. Hang on. That sounds like a fun show. And if your show's not out yet, I highly recommend the most recent episode where you're chatting with David Bixenspan about the Vince McMahon doc. David, you guys brought up so many points where I was like, hell yeah. Just the idea of, the women, the only women who the only women that were really interviewed, right, for the Vince doc were all women who are either Vince's family or Trish Stratus, who is like a company gal, right? But there's no one else in this entire scope that they couldn't pull out. And I was like, why didn't I think of that? Like, it's just the podcast you had with Bix was a series of course, they're right. Why didn't I think of this? It's so obvious.
Yes, it's that's not time I'm ever going to get back. That time I spent watching this documentary.
I didn't hate the first 2 episodes, but episode 3 and on, no, there's nothing here.
I watched some kind of because I felt pressured to watch them so I could have like content related to them. And like I probably watched them in like 2 quick succession. I was just like, I'm so sick of hearing about some of this stuff because a lot of it is old ground, for people like you and I.
A lot of it is, but hey, at least we learn. At least Hulk Hogan admitted to snitching to Vince about the union. That's something, right? That's news.
Surely that will change a lot of things.